So what's going on with the Republican Party right now? Joining me is from Baton Rouge is Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator Cassidy, it is good to see you after the election. So let me just start with that. What did you learn from this election?
I learned that the American people want a way forward that actually focuses on ideas that will make their lives better, not just their lives, but that for future generations. Those who are most closely aligned with the former president underperformed. Those who are talking about the future, who had managed their states well, they overperformed. The American people want ideas. They want a future.
It sounds like you just blame Donald Trump for the Senate, at least. Is that fair?
No, I'm looking at it empirically. Those that were most closely aligned with the past, those are the ones that underperformed. We as a party need to have a debate about ideas. In that debate, we need to explain to the American people exactly where we think our country should go. And by the way, since I think using market forces to make the individual's life more free, more prosperous is the way to go, I think we win that debate.
You know, it's interesting. You have not been shy about your criticism of Donald Trump. You voted to convict him after January 6th. When you look at your vote and you look at the votes of some of your colleagues that we know were thinking about it but decided not to, in hindsight, how big of a mistake was it not to convict Trump when you had the chance?
I can't speak to that. Again, that's more of a focus upon the past. The American people wish to have a discussion about the future. I think they really want to air out ideas as to, okay, which party has better ideas? I'm an ideas guy. I welcome that debate. I think our party should be pointing to the future. I think our country should be. And I think that's the only way we give the American voter that which she or he deserves.
You know, it's interesting. There was a bit of a debate between the head of the Senate Campaign Committee, Rick Scott, and the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, about should the Republicans offer up an agenda to run on. Now, Rick Scott offered up something that not every Republican was happy about. Mitch McConnell said, we'll wait till after the election. So where do you sit on that debate?
We are after the election. We've got big problems in our country. The degree that both parties duck these big problems is the degree that the voter says pox in both your houses. So let's have a debate about the domestic issues, about the foreign issues, and then let's implement. We've got to get some things done. By the way, Chuck, I think I can say this with some credibility. Since I have been involved, or frankly, either in the mix or leading on issues to limit surprise medical billing, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to do the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We can get things done. We need to get them done. And that's, I think, what the American voter is looking for.
Do you think it's time for a change in leadership among Senate Republicans? Do you think it's time for Senator McConnell to step down?
You know, I'm actually going to support Mitch. I think Mitch kind of pulled the chestnuts out of the fire for candidates who, for whatever reason, were having a difficult time raising the money that as you pointed out, was required to have a winning campaign. And I think going forward, Mitch will be our leader. But that is not to say that we're not going to have a necessary debate about ideas. And I think it's very, again, one more time, important for us to explain to the American voter why Republicans have a better vision for the future of our country.
I guess I ask this, if this is the result of these elections, but the Republican Party still has sort of the same leadership at RNC, Ronna McDaniel, Kevin McCarthy of House Republicans, Mitch McConnell of Senate Republicans, and of course Donald Trump is sort of the leader out there. If there's no change there, do you think that's a problem for Republicans going forward?
First, we're not a cult. We're not like, okay, there's one person who leads our party. If we have a sitting president, she or he will be the leader of our party. But we should be a party of ideas and principles. And that's what should lead us. And I will go back. What we've been lacking, perhaps, is that fulsome discussion followed up with the policy initiatives that we work to pass that will define who we are. Again, we are not going to have one person anointed unless she or he happens to be a sitting president. We should have a set of principles and ideas and legislative accomplishments that is our lodestar, if you will. That's where we need to go.
I understand that's where you should go. How do you get the party there? Because you know how hard it is. You know the base of this party still loves Donald Trump. Or do you think that this midterm could break that spell?
You know, elections are about winning, And so if folks want to look at these election results and decide that's where you want us to continue to be, then we're not going to do well. If people are going to look at these election results and say, hey, listen, the Republicans have established ourselves as the anti-woke brand. We care about being anti-woke. Now let's have a series of policy initiatives that actually help people's lives get better. I can point to the examples I mentioned earlier that I've been involved with. Surprise medical billing, that legislation has prevented about 11 million surprise medical bills in this year since it was signed into law in January. That's fantastic. Similarly, we can go to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was led by the Senate with Republicans fully engaged in making sure that the average American, for example, has access to high-speed, affordable Internet. We can look at those legislative accomplishments, get them done, build the credibility so that next time, next election, people decide to vote Republican.
Look, Donald Trump's announcing his candidacy for president on Tuesday, whether anybody wants him to or not. And we understand people have tried to get him to postpone this decision. He's not going to do that. Are you at all concerned that his just mere presence is just going to make it that much harder for Republicans to recover?
You know, we have to be a party about the future. And so if we're talking about the future of the American voter, she'll make her choice. And if we have results that show these are our ideas. Now, if the left frustrates our efforts, well, that will be part of what we will discuss. But we just have to make that case. I think you see, for example, a governor like Governor Devine in Ohio, who's governed extremely well, given an example of putting forward policies that make the people in Ohio's lives better. And he had an incredible victory. And we can go around the country and see that. So if we have a track record, if we have the ideas, then we will appeal to that voter talking about the future.
Look, I understand that, and I know where you're trying to head here, but Donald Trump doesn't want to head in the direction you want to head. How do you stop that direction? What do you do? Do you rally around? Is it time to rally around Ron DeSantis now?
By offering an alternative. Again, the Republican Party should be the party of ideas and principles. I think I have attempted to live my political life that way. Principles, ideas that will work to make the American people's lives better. Who is our next nominee will sort itself out. But we have to appeal to those within our party and without our party if we are going to win. And they're going to respond to a positive message which says this is how our ideas will make your life better. Now, we should welcome that debate. I do. I try and live my life with principles and ideas. And if we do that, then we will win.
Can you imagine having to support Donald Trump again if he's the nominee of your party?
Our party should be about the future. I think our next candidate will be looking to the future, not to the past. And I think our next candidate will win. And so I anticipate supporting a candidate who's looking to the future.
And if that candidate's Donald Trump, do you plan on supporting that candidate?
You're giving me a theoretical, which actually I don't think will come to transpire, because we have to be looking to the future. And so you can give me a theoretical after a theoretical.
Okay.
I will say we should be a party of ideas and principles. I welcome that. I've tried to live my life that way, and I think our next candidate will similarly embody that perspective.
All right. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.